You have $2,900,000. You are standing at station 4 on the line, and there is a fresh burn across the back of your left forearm from the ceiling press, right next to the old one from 3 years ago, and nobody in this building knows your bank balance has 7 figures in it. Your name is on a punch card in a plastic slot by the door, same as it has been for 18 years. You clock in at 5:47 a.m. because 5:47 beats the rush at the time clock and 6 o'clock doesn't. You drive a 2010 Hyundai Elantra with 214,000 miles on it, silver going gray at the wheel wells, a crack in the windshield shaped like a lightning bolt that you have looked at every morning for 4 years and never bothered to fix. You are 43 years old. You have $2,900,000, and you buy the store brand coffee filters because the name brand ones are 11 cents more per box, and you have never once done the math on what 11 cents costs you over a year, because the math was never the point. Nobody asks how you're doing financially. Nobody would think to. You wear the same navy Dickies you've worn since 2015, the knees gone thin, a hole starting at the left cuff that you keep meaning to patch. Your arms tell the story people think they're reading, 18 years of burns, small ones from the heat sealer, one long one from a jammed conveyor guard in 2019 that took 4 months to stop being tender. People see the arms and think they know your net worth. They are off by roughly $2,900,000. You live in the same house you bought in 2011, a 1,050 square foot rambler on a street where every house looks like it was built from the same 3 blueprints. The mortgage was $640 a month back then. You paid it off in year 14 and told nobody, not even your brother, because the day you paid it off was a Tuesday and you had to be at the plant by 6, and there wasn't really a moment to tell anyone anything. You still eat lunch out of the same insulated bag, the zipper pull replaced twice with a paper clip. Turkey on wheat, an apple, the coffee from the machine near the break room that costs 50 cents and tastes like it was filtered through a shop rag. Your job title, if anyone asked, is Line Operator 3. You've had 2 raises to line operator status in 18 years, the kind of raises that show up as 40 more cents an hour and a pat on the shoulder from a supervisor who has been there 11 months. You know the line the way you know your own hands, because your hands are how you know the line. You know the sound the press makes half a second before it jams. You know which sealer heads run hot and which ones run true. You know because you've been standing in the same 6-foot radius of factory floor since you were 25 years old, and somewhere in that radius, without anyone noticing, you built $2,900,000. You do not tell people. This is not modesty, not exactly. It is closer to instinct, the same instinct that makes you check both mirrors before changing lanes even on an empty road. You learned early that money talked about becomes money asked for, or envied, or judged. Your co-worker Denny, who runs Station 6, once got an inheritance check for $40,000 and told everyone at the plant within a week. 6 months later he'd bought a truck, a boat he used twice, and was borrowing gas money from the vending machine fund by October. You watched that happen and filed it away the way you file away a machine that jams under certain conditions, noted, avoided, never spoken of again. The freedom you have is not the freedom people picture when they picture $2,900,000. It is not a freedom of yachts or plane tickets or quitting on a Friday with a speech. It is quieter than that. It is the freedom of knowing that if the plant closed tomorrow, if the line went dark and the punch cards got swept into a box, you would go home, make coffee, and be fine. Genuinely fine. Not tighten the belt fine. Fine in the way water is wet, a fact underneath everything else, not a decision you'd have to make. That fact sits in you quietly on ordinary Tuesdays, and it is the only thing about your life that would surprise anyone, if anyone knew to ask. You think about the money maybe 4 minutes a day, usually at night, usually while the dishes dry on the rack. You do not think about it while you're standing at the sealer, because the sealer requires your full attention or it takes a piece of you, and it already has taken pieces of you, twice, on both arms. The money is not a thing you carry into the building. It stays in the car, in the house, in a manila folder in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet you bought at a yard sale for $6. That separation is not effortless. It's not something you were born knowing. You built the wall between money and self on purpose, the same slow way you built the money, one small choice at a time, none of them dramatic, all of them repeated until they weren't choices anymore, just who you were. Here is what the money actually means to you, if you strip away every polite word people use for it. It means you are not afraid. Not of Denny's kind of afraid, the kind that shows up as bragging. Not of the other kind either, the quiet kind that has your coworkers flinching every time the plant manager calls a meeting, because a meeting might mean layoffs and layoffs might mean the truck payment doesn't get made in October. You watched a coworker named Marcus, Station 2, turn gray in the face during a meeting like that in 2021. You sat 2 seats down. Your own face didn't move, and it wasn't because you're a better actor than Marcus. It's because you had nothing to be afraid of, and fear is hard to fake and hard to hide, and the absence of it is even harder to hide, so you learned to keep your face doing what everyone else's face was doing anyway. The psychology of it runs deeper than fear, though. It runs into identity, into the plain fact that you never once, in 18 years, wanted the version of yourself that spends money to announce something. You've seen what that version looks like on other people. It looks like Denny's boat, sitting in his driveway with a thin film of pollen on it 11 months a year. It looks like a coworker's new truck with payments that eat 40% of a paycheck that was never going to stretch that far. Spending like that is a sentence you say to the world, and you never wanted to say anything to the world. You wanted the world to leave you alone, and money, quiet money, invisible money, turned out to be the best way to make that happen. Loud money invites questions. Loud money invites family members with sudden emergencies. Loud money invites a version of your own face looking back at you in the mirror that you didn't especially want to meet. There's also a colder piece of the psychology, one you don't say out loud even to yourself very often. The burns on your arms are proof of something. Proof you showed up. Proof you didn't take the easy hour, didn't call in on the days the line was running a bad batch and everyone's hands were raw by 2 p.m. The money, in some back room of your mind, is proof of a different thing, that showing up wasn't wasted. That the burns bought something besides more burns. You never needed anyone else to see that proof. You needed to know it existed. A bank balance you never mentioned to anyone is still, absolutely, still true, whether or not a single other person on the planet believes it. That was the whole appeal. Truth that doesn't need witnesses. The freedom equation, if you ever wrote it down, wouldn't have a $sign in the answer. It would look more like this: hours you don't have to sell out of desperation, divided by the number of people who can make demands on those hours. As the top number climbed $2,900,000, then $2,900,000, then past $1 million without you marking the day, the bottom number didn't shrink because you quit anything. It shrank because you stopped needing anyone's permission. Your supervisor could deny a vacation request and it would be an annoyance, a scheduling puzzle, never a crisis. Your car could throw a check engine light and it would be a Saturday errand, not a 3-week negotiation with dread. The equation isn't about escaping the line. You never left the line. It's about the line no longer being able to threaten you with anything worse than boredom. The system you built has no name, because you never called it a system while you were building it. It started with a decision so small it barely counts as a decision. In 2008, 2 years before you even bought the Elantra, you were driving a 2001 Corolla with a bad muffler, and a coworker mentioned the plant had a 401k with a match and almost nobody signed up for it because the paperwork sat in a drawer in HR that people forgot existed. You signed up on your lunch break. 4% of your check, matched by the plant up to 4%. It took 11 minutes. You didn't feel anything doing it. There was no swell of music, no moment you'd later describe as a turning point, because it wasn't one, not yet, it was just a form. What made it a turning point was that you never touched it again. Not once in 18 years did you take a loan against it, not when the transmission went in 2013, not when your mother's medical bills came due in 2016, not when the roof needed replacing in 2018. You found other ways to cover those, mostly by living so far under your income that a $4,000 emergency was an inconvenience, not a crisis. That gap between what you earned and what you spent is the entire system. It's not clever. It's not a strategy anyone would put in a book. Line operator pay in your state tops out around $52,000 a year with overtime, and you never made more than that, not once, not even in the good years. You just never let your spending catch up to it. Every raise, every overtime check, every tax refund went the same 3 places, in the same order, automatically, so the decision only had to be made once. First, the 401k raised a percentage point every time you got a raise, so your paycheck's after-tax number barely moved even as your contribution did. By year 6 you were putting in 11% and didn't remember consciously deciding on 11, because you decided on 1%, 6 different times. Second, a Roth IRA you opened in 2012 after reading a library book on a rain delay, funded automatically from checking every payday, $150 at first, later $300, invested in the same 2 low-cost index funds the whole time because you researched them once for about 6 hours on a Sunday and never felt the need to research again. Third, whatever was left went into a taxable brokerage account, same index funds, same automatic transfer, same complete lack of drama. The compounding is the part nobody on the plant floor would believe if you told them, so you never told them. $1 invested at 25 doesn't feel different from $1 invested at 35. It behaves completely differently. By the time you were 35, the money you'd put in during your 20s had roughly doubled without you adding another cent to that particular chunk. By 40, it had doubled again. You watched this happen in the most undramatic way imaginable: a quarterly statement, a PDF you opened on your phone in the parking lot before a shift, a number that ticked up a little more each year, occasionally ticking down, and you trained yourself early not to flinch at the ticking down. 2008 happened while your first contributions were brand new and small, and you watched the number drop and kept contributing anyway, because the form you'd signed didn't have a pause button you knew how to find, and it turned out not finding the pause button was the best financial decision you never technically made. You never picked stocks. You want to be clear about that, even in the privacy of your own head, because there's a pride some people take in stock picking that you never had any use for. Index funds, the whole way. Total market, a bond fund you added in your late 30s, rebalanced once a year on your birthday because that was an easy date to remember, never touched otherwise. The vehicles were boring on purpose. Boring meant you didn't have to think about it during the 10 hours a day your hands were busy on the line. Boring meant no headline could talk you into selling at the wrong moment, because you weren't watching headlines. You didn't own individual stocks in individual companies for the same reason you didn't buy a truck with payments. Both were ways of inviting drama into a life you'd built specifically to be drama-free. Year 1 on this particular road didn't feel like the start of anything. It felt like a form filled out on a lunch break and then 11 months of nothing happening that you could see. Your take-home pay dropped by about $85 a paycheck once the 401k contribution kicked in, and for the first 2 months you noticed it every single time, a small subtraction you felt in the gas tank you filled a little less full. You were 25. Your co-workers were buying things: a used motorcycle here, a flat screen there. One guy financed a jet ski he used 4 times before the payments outlasted the summer. You bought nothing. Not out of some grand plan. You genuinely didn't have $85 a paycheck of appetite for things. You'd grown up in a house where a full pantry was the luxury, and $85 felt, in some old childhood part of your brain, like the difference between a full pantry and an empty one, so you let it go without much of a fight. The doubts came later that first year, around September, when your Elantra, the first one, not this one, this was a 2004 model back then, needed brakes and you had exactly $340 in checking and the brake job was $310. You remember standing in the shop parking lot doing math on your phone, the kind of math where you're not really calculating, you're just moving numbers around to make yourself feel less like the ground is tilting. You paid for the brakes. You ate ramen for 11 days, actual ramen, the 10 for $1 kind, not out of a system, just out of what was left. You did not touch the 401k. It never crossed your mind as an option, not because you were disciplined in some heroic sense, but because 11 minutes of paperwork back in the spring had felt final in a way that was easy to respect and hard to undo, and undoing it would have meant more paperwork, and you were too tired after a double shift to want more paperwork. By December of that first year, your 401k statement showed $2,140. You remember the exact number because you stared at it a long time in the break room, not because it was impressive, it very much was not impressive, but because it was the first time in your adult life a number existed that you hadn't touched, that had grown a little on its own, quietly, without your permission, the same way a burn scar closes over without you doing anything except not picking at it. That was the whole first milestone. Not a number that changed your life. A number that proved the system, such as it was, hadn't broken yet. The first real milestone that felt like something was $2,900,000 reached in month 19. You didn't celebrate. You did, on the drive home that day, allow yourself exactly one thought: if I never do anything different than this, in 40 years this becomes something. You didn't do the compound interest math in your head, you weren't a math person, still aren't, really, you just trust the machine you built to do the math for you. But you let that one sentence sit in the car with you for the length of the drive, 12 minutes, and then you put it away and didn't think about it again for months, because thinking about it too much felt like the kind of thing that leads to touching money you'd promised yourself you wouldn't touch. There were sacrifices that year that don't sound like sacrifices when you say them out loud, which is exactly why nobody noticed them. You kept the same phone for 4 years past when your coworkers were upgrading. You cut your own hair with clippers you bought for $22 in 2009 and have used every 3 weeks since, a decision that has, over 18 years, saved you something in the range of $6,000, though you never calculated that number until much later and it startled you a little when you did. You packed lunch every single working day except for the 4 days across 18 years when the lunch bag genuinely got left on the kitchen counter and you had no choice. You didn't do any of it with the grim energy of sacrifice. It just stopped registering as sacrifice around month 8, the way cold water stops registering as cold once you're all the way in. By year 5, the money had stopped behaving like something you were building and started behaving like something that was building itself, which is the strange hinge point nobody warns you about. The combined accounts, 401k, Roth, the taxable brokerage, crossed $2,900,000 in March, a Tuesday, discovered not through any ceremony but through the habit you developed of checking the consolidated number on the first of the month while the coffee brewed. You stood in your kitchen, the same kitchen, and looked at $2,900,000 on a phone screen and felt something close to nothing. Not disappointment. Just a kind of flat recognition, like reading a weather report for a city you don't live in anymore. The number was real. It also had nothing to do with the burn on your forearm from that morning's shift, or the load of laundry you needed to start, or the fact that your Elantra, this one now, the 2010, bought used in year 4 for $8,200 cash, the only large purchase you'd made in 5 years, had a tire that needed rotating. The snowball effect showed up not as a feeling but as a shrinking gap, the gap between what your money earned while you slept and what your hands earned while you worked the line. In year 1, the gap was enormous, almost embarrassing. Your hands earned nearly everything. By year 5, on a good year in the market, the money itself was generating more in a single quarter than 8 straight weeks of overtime. You never mentioned this to anyone, partly because it would have sounded like bragging and partly because it didn't feel like something worth mentioning. It felt more like weather. Some quarters it rained money. Some quarters the market dropped and it felt like nothing had happened at all, and you kept contributing at the same rate either way, because the one lesson 2008 had already taught you, early and for free, was that panic is the only real way to turn a paper loss into a permanent one. Life changes nobody noticed piled up quietly in that stretch. You paid cash for a $4,300 furnace replacement in year 6 without blinking, something that would have been a financed, sleep-losing event in year 1. You stopped feeling the small dread that used to show up every time a supervisor called your name across the floor, the automatic flinch that assumes bad news, because bad news had lost its teeth. You gave your brother $6,000 in year 7 when his daughter needed braces and his insurance covered less than expected, and you gave it as a gift, not a loan, and told him it was some savings, a phrase technically true and completely misleading, and he never asked a follow-up question because nothing about your life invited one. Internally, that gift felt different than any purchase you'd ever made, the only time in years the money felt like it was doing something instead of just existing. The internal shift was less about confidence and more about the absence of a specific kind of noise. You stopped doing the parking lot math. You stopped mentally rehearsing what you'd say if the plant announced layoffs. You noticed, somewhere around year 8, that you'd gone an entire year without once losing sleep over a bill, and you noticed it the way you'd notice a headache had finally lifted, mostly by the sudden absence of something you'd stopped registering as present at all. By year 10, the number was $2,900,000, and you found out the way you found out every other milestone, on your phone, in the kitchen, coffee brewing, a Tuesday. You were 43. You still worked Station 4. You still drove the 2010 Elantra, now with 214,000 miles, the windshield crack still there, still unfixed, because fixing it had simply never made the list of things that mattered enough to interrupt a Saturday. You still bought the store brand coffee filters. You still packed the same lunch, the zipper pull's still a paperclip. Nothing about the morning distinguished itself from 4,000 other mornings before it, except the number on the screen. And even the number didn't distinguish itself much, it was simply larger than last month's number, the way it had been larger than the month before that, for 10 years running, in a pattern so consistent it had stopped feeling like news. You clocked in at 5:47. Denny complained about his boat's engine trouble at the time clock, the same boat, 11 years now, still costing him money every season it sits in the driveway. You nodded, said something about hoping it wasn't the fuel pump, and walked to Station 4. Where the sealer was running warm and needed a 10-minute cooldown before shift start. Nobody in the building knew what the phone in your locker had shown you an hour earlier. Nobody asked. The burns on your arms looked exactly like they'd looked the week before, the year before, a decade before, proof of a life that, on paper, contradicted the 7-figure account by every visual measure available, and satisfied you completely anyway, because the account was never supposed to change what the mornings looked like. That was the entire design, arrived at slowly, one form and one unspent dollar at a time, until a person standing at a stamping press with burns on both arms turned out to be worth $2,900,000, and nothing on the outside gave it away, not the car, not the Dickies, not the coffee, not one single thing. If this story resonated with you, subscribe. I post a new story every single day. If you want to start investing today, the Robinhood link is in the description, it comes with a free stock. And if you want the weekly letter, the Quiet Wealth letter, that link is there too. See you tomorrow.